Our first presenter for this session is Dr. Galia Petkova. She is a professor of literature at IK University of Hiroshima. She has been teaching and conducting extensive research on Japanese traditional performing arts and Japanese culture at universities in Europe, Canada, Indonesia, and Japan for over 20 years. Dr. Petkova earned her PhD in Japanese Studies from SOAS University of London. She has been in receipt of numerous grants, including from Japan Foundation and Japan Society for Promotion of Science, and has undertaken research at the International Research Center for Japanese Studies for 4 years between 2014 and 2018. Her investigative interests are performing arts in Asia, focusing on Japan and gender studies, cultural representation of gender, and construction of ideas and ideals of femininity and masculinity in performative space. Dr. Petkova's two more recent projects focus on regional performing arts in Japan and the female versions of all male traditional performing arts and kabuki masculine heroes in Japan or in Japanese culture. Traditional performing arts play an important part in the life of local communities throughout Japan, strengthening the bonds between community members, maintaining their identity, attracting visitors, generating income, and very often effectively stimulating the local economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected every aspect of our life, especially community life and performance culture in general. This paper explores the epidemic's impact on local performing arts, focusing on Dainimbutsu Kyogen and Rokusai Nimbutsu in Kyoto. Both genres originate in the Nimbutsu Buddhist prayer performance, conceived as a means to communicate the Buddhist faith to the common people in early medieval time. Dainimbutsu Kyogen consists of short plays, mostly comic, staged either as pantomimes or with spoken lines. It is relatively well known and annually performed at three important Buddhist temples in Kyoto. Rokusai Nimbutsu presents a dance accompanied by chanting of prayers and various other pieces, including lion dance. It is lesser known and only recently has become more actively presented during Obon, the Festival of Souls. All Kyoto troops are closely connected with the neighborhoods that support them and rely on the involvement of young members of the communities. This paper examines the ways in which the respective communities have responded to the challenging situation, for example, by adjusting rehearsal and performance schedules and formats using technology to reach out to audiences, changing the repertory, etc. The aim is to elucidate the key role that traditional performing arts continue to play in Japan, even in times of a pandemic, and how they could be utilized as a means of social inclusion and empowerment. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Galia Petkova.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, thank you very much for this detailed introduction, also for reading my abstract. This really helps. I would like to thank the organizers, especially Professor Tiatko, for giving us the chance to get together and have presentations on this such an important topic over the past 2 years. Since I've been well introduced, also the audience should be familiar with my abstract, and my presentation might run a little bit longer, like 25 minutes, if I cover both genres. So today I'm presenting the research I've been doing over the past 2 years since the Corona started. I've been living in Kyoto for about 12 years in total, but since 2014 now. And I just moved from Hiroshima, but I still keep in contact with the local performing art communities in Kyoto. So we those of us who do traditional performing arts in Asia, we are well aware how important these performances are for the identity, both local identity and national identity as well. Japan is famous with the mainstream classical genres of kabuki, no theater, the comic plays kyogen, the bunraku theater, the puppet theater. But there's actually an amazing amount of local performing arts, which I discovered after I started a project on local performances. And they're particularly important for the life of the local communities. They're usually staged at festivals. They require a lot of training. They serve to strengthen the bonds between the community members, mostly the bonds between the male members of the community, because it's men who still perform predominantly in traditional Japanese performing arts. And also they attract visitors. They sell different products related to the performance and very often generate incomes for the local economy. So I have chosen these two genres because I've been working with the two troupes for a while. I'm well familiar with the members. I was thinking even to start rehearsing with them, but then the corona happened. So both genres are performed exclusively in Kyoto, which is the old capital of Japan and which was the center of cultural life until like mid 18th century. They have quite long history actually. They are not performed all the time, of course, and in the same way as they were performed in the past. We don't have records how they were performed because these are folk performances basically. There are periods of decline, particularly during the Japanese economy boom, when the Japanese were not very interested in traditional culture and it was not sponsored by the government sufficiently. And most of them are revived, but a lot of these forms are in decline because there are no people to take over. The young generation is not particularly interested, and my presentation will focus on how the performers try to get the young generation involved, especially during the time of the pandemic. Both of these performances are related to the Buddhist performance culture. They are staged at temples. The Kyoto troupes are very closely connected with the neighborhoods. So this was part of my abstract, so I'll skip it. So my presentation is structured like, because I have a lot on Saga Nembutsu Kyogen, and I even thought that the presentation should focus only on this form, but the comparison between the two forms and how they responded to the corona situation is interesting, so I'll try to cover Rokusai Nembutsu as well. We see that both genres share one word, which is Nembutsu, and Butsu means Buddha, so these are, it means a Buddhist prayer. And these are the religious practices of chanting the name of Buddha. In Japan, Namu Amida Butsu is used. This Buddhist prayer gave birth to two genres. The first one is dance, and this is exactly what Rokusai Nembutsu is. And the second one is the pantomime. I will talk first about the pantomime. The word kyogen is used today for the traditional genre of the comic interlude staged between the no drama. It also meant a play in general. It was used in kabuki. Nembutsu kyogen is a different genre. It's a folk genre performed by amateur and troops, and it started around the 13th century, and this is the time when Buddhism spread among the common people and in the countryside. Until that moment, Buddhism was mostly a religion of the imperial court aristocracy in Kyoto. So this genre started as a way to spread Buddhism and Buddhist faith, and develop gradually into entertainment. So there are similar genres all over Asia. There were similar genres in medieval Europe. So it's part of the development of human performance culture. While in the past they expressed the locals' deep Buddhist faith, today the focus is most on this strong tie between the community and this age-old performing arts, which they try to preserve. Three temples in Kyoto. They were already presented. They're in very interesting power relations. So the Mibu temple is the most conservative in terms of their performance. Only men perform. Spectators pay a very small fee, but they pay. And with Sagan and Butsukyogen, on which I'm going to focus, both temples claim the origin of these performing arts. There is a legend that the monks who established respectively the two temples originated the art. And there is the third temple. It's in the commercial textile kimono center of Kyoto, and this one is a spoken drama. It's very influenced by Kyogen in the no performance. Also, they allow women. Women play the flute. And in Sagan and Butsukyogen, both girls and boys are trained, but still only men perform. There is still a resistance in the male part of the community to allow women to perform. So originally this is a pantomime, and all actors wear a mask. So this is important actually when we come to speak about the rehearsals during the Corona time. The music is very simple, only drum, flutes, and bells. It is staged by amateurs, but it doesn't mean lack of skills, as we all know that traditional performing arts in Asia, when staged by local people, there is also a very high level of artistry. So there's rigorous training during which the generation bonds. Very important for the local communities. The local communities are actually maintaining these genres, and they have a long history. So some masks are very old and very precious, as old and precious as the no masks. Mibudera, for example, they're more wealthy and they could afford to produce copies of their masks. So they're not using the valuable originals, but the other two troops cannot afford this. And there's a lot of entertainment in the performances. So what started as a serious Buddhist drama has been turned into a comic theater. They make fun of Buddhist monks, of Buddhism itself. The performance structure is usually 1 to 4 plays, but 3 or 4 plays is more often. They're very short, up to 1 hour. The longest one, and there is a half an hour break during which the spectators can purchase goods related to the performance, and also since they are staged during festivals, this is a way to encourage the spectators actually to go to the different stalls, buy food, and spend money. They're performed in open stage, on a special stage, but the visitors, the spectators, sit outside. And this is to give you an idea. So we have this, this is the Seiryoji temple in Arashiyama, where the Saga Nembutsu Kyogen is based. This is the temple grounds are quite huge. These are the 3 pine torches that would be lit during the festival. And here, this part here is the, it's not visible on the picture, but the Kyogen theater hall is staged here, and it looks like a small house actually. They collected money to renovate the roof and the stage. Half of the expenses were covered by the state, but half the local people collected. These are a lot of expenses. And actually, to what extent an art would be preserved, of course, depends entirely on the local people. And usually there is 1 or 2 men, in the Japanese case, who are in charge of the performances. So the individual factor in the community is very important. And especially in the case of Saga Nembutsu, university lecturers and researchers get involved, and they find various ways to use traditional performance and make it like more popular among the kids mostly. They do perform in Asia occasionally, sponsored by the Japanese government. This is how the stage look like. So the stage is on the 2nd floor. Now during the corona, the spectator seats are reduced, maybe like 40–50% compared to before. This is the stage after the renovation. So we can see here when they during rehearsal they actually use the mask, because mask is very important in all these mask theaters. When the performer learns the body movements to get feeling of the stage. That's why there are these pillars here to mark the stage space. There is one interesting stage device here, this one here. So it's for the supernatural characters to appear or disappear, more often disappear from the stage. The masks look exactly like the masks in No and Kyogen theater. They're very, very valuable. They're protected in these special silk bags. The 1st floor serves as a dressing room, a storage for the costumes, for the masks, for the accessories, but also as a communal space. There are usually tables, and when the community gathers to share a meal or drink after the performance, and where they gather during the rehearsals. Just to give you an idea about, so this is the most, so each troupe, they share the repertory, but each one has one original play that is performed only there. So this one, first, like now the it's only a flute and this gong. It's called Shaka Nyorai, which is the principal deity worshipped in the temple. And a beautiful mother and an ugly daughter come to pray to this Buddhist figure, which might be an imposter. And Buddha likes her, and at the end they leave together. So when the daughter comes over, I don't have a. So she has this. She uses this ugly, plain-looking woman mask. Buddha doesn't like her, and he turns his back at her. So this is a kind of comic story, and the performance is based on a lot of repetitions and movements need time to be embodied, but they're not that complicated. So they have annual performances, which are set dates on March 15, which is the Buddha, passing into Nirvana, and there's the Fire Festival. Also, they perform the first 2 weeks of April. So they perform in spring and in autumn. And these are the two seasons of the cherry blossoms and the maple leaves. When a lot of people come to the area to enjoy, because it's a very popular area for sakura and maple leaves. But they also, especially in recent years and after they renovated the Kyogen Hall, started like taking part in different performances. They collaborate with the other troupe in Sembon. In a lot of exhibitions and especially kids-oriented performances. So there is an adult troupe and kids troupe. They even have ideas to collaborate with contemporary avant-garde dance, but it still hasn't happened. The influence of COVID. So in Japan, all performances in 2020 were cancelled, actually. From April, a state of emergency was declared. It ended in June, but performances were cancelled. All festivals were cancelled. Only the religious rituals were held. How do the community and the performers compensate? So they took part in a lot of activities, especially involving kids. So they make sure that the connection with the kids does not get interrupted. They even took part in a movie about a deaf girl, which was sponsored by the local municipality with the purpose to raise awareness about the discrimination disabled people face. This one is uploaded on YouTube. It's a 20-minute short movie. They took part in a promotional video for overseas audiences, radio programs, 3 exhibitions in different central parts of Kyoto. So they remind the Kyoto people about their art. I was told that the rehearsals were held all the time. I haven't asked why. Perhaps because it's mostly young people involved. They use masks, wooden masks also, so the danger of infection is not that high. So they do rehearsal every Saturday. Kids in the afternoon and adults in the evening. And when kids are involved, this means that their mothers and their family members also come to the Kyogen Hall and get involved as well. 2021, the performances were resumed after the second state of emergency was over. In general, Japan did not suffer that much from COVID as the Western world. There are less victims and it's a different culture also. So what they did, this Saganembutsu Kyogen, is actually they staged performances under the definition open rehearsal. So they eliminated the word performance, so they do not attract any criticism, especially by the authority. And they changed the performance format, so they performed 1 or 2 plays. They scheduled longer breaks, reduced the number of the spectators. The only performances that were cancelled were during the festivals because they're not organized by the Kyogen people. But there was another very, very important event. I'm not looking at the chat, by the way, so if I get over time, you have to tell me. For the first time in the history of these 3 genres, a joint performance was held. It was held in the form of this Kyoto Traditional Performing Arts Festival 2021. They're planning another one next year. The initiative was from the two Kyogen troops that collaborate, because Mibu Kyogen, they consider themselves a kind of semi-professional and higher level, and they did not want to perform together, and it was actually the Kyoto city authorities that literally told them, you have to do this. The idea was born the previous year. I still haven't figured out whether it's related to the COVID-19 and the determination to continue popularizing the art, because all these local performing arts felt threatened since they cannot perform any longer. Each troupe performed one play that is unique in their repertory. But no DVD of the whole performance was produced. Each troupe got their own recordings and they decide what to do with it. It's the perfect way to compare the three troupes of the same genre and to see the differences in their performance. A lot of other activities and performances were held, again involving the kids Kyogen Club, another participation in a movie shooting about the nearby sacred Mount Atago, exhibitions, and what they've been doing since last fall, and it continued until last week, screening documentaries about Kyoto traditional culture, especially very old documentaries featuring Nembutsu Kyogen. So this is a way again to popularize their art. Rehearsals are still held regularly. Overall, they feel that COVID-19 did not exert so much negative influence, though last year, and especially in 2020, we all the time we were having this conversation that the situation is terrible and they cannot perform. Not many members were coming to the rehearsals. They still kept in contact using like Line application, and they use technology. They actually set their YouTube channel. Do I have time? Okay.
Yes, both. Yeah, we can.
How many minutes? Do I have like 5 more minutes? Okay, so I think I'll cover the next form. I came across it recently. So this is one of the Nembutsu Buddhist prayer dances. It's not so widely performed in Kyoto. There is again a legend related to a monk that was dancing with his disciples on the street of Kyoto, chanting and using this striking a metallic bow. And actually Kyoto, the history of Kyoto is related with a lot of epidemics because it's hot and very humid in summer. So a lot of festivals and rituals were created to placate the gods during pandemics. The Gion Festival, the major festival of Kyoto, was started for this reason. So Rokusai Nembutsu is actually closely connected to the epidemics in the past. One of the ways to prevent epidemics in Kyoto. So it was very popular during the pre-modern period, like late 19th, early 20th century. I was told that they compare it in a kind of way to the modern rap, like young people were involved, and then of course with the modernization the interest disappeared. It even stopped to be performed for a while. It was revived, but it's not such a tourist attraction as the Nembutsu Kyogen. Recently it's been more actively presented. Actually, I've lived in Kyoto for 12 years, but I found out about this form only like 5 years ago, because there was a symposium. So the form of performance is like various short pieces. It could be like up to 7 or 8 within 1 hour, or not more than hour and a half. The rhythm is the main focus, and the skills of the drummers. It's quite attractive for the young generation. It's fun to do it, and it ends with a lion dance. There's like some kind of acrobatic, also scene with lion dance and a no character. This is how it looks like, and this is just short examples of the. So there is more music. They also create new pieces or recreate old pieces, their original pieces, but the culmination of the performance is this, the so-called four drums. And here everyone performs, everyone gets to perform, from the less experienced. This performance is in a tempo. They would perform two drummers, four drummers, so it's about showing off. And gradually, the more experienced and skillful performers show their artistry. At the end, is always the male member, the main male member of the performer, of the troupe, and the teacher. So the influence of COVID, they stopped during the state of emergencies, like in 2020 for 2 months, they did not do rehearsals at all. Their rehearsals are not every week, but twice a month. Their approach was to do less rehearsals with the adults, because COVID is more dangerous for the adults. So they focused on the kids' rehearsals. They usually get the kids from the local schools involved. And the positive side was that there was more time for rehearsals with the kids, and in this way the kids got to practice the more complex pieces usually performed by the adults. Right now they do not perform, because most of Japan is under this state of quasi-emergency, but the other troops, Saga Nembutsu Kyogen, they continue with the rehearsals. And a major problem is because the type of performance requires like constant training in order to get better. This is like sport activity in a way. And if they do not practice enough and regularly, they do mistakes during the performances, which for the adults is not a problem, but the young members of the troupe get upset. They take the whole experience far more emotionally. They usually perform 2 types they don't call it performance, but it's rather offering to the ancestor spirits. So One is during the Obon Festival. They perform in front of on a similar stage. In 2020, they performed without spectators, and they also live streamed on YouTube. And also, but there is another form which I witnessed, like door-to-door performances in the evening, a kind of memorial service for the ancestors. And they had only 2 cancellations during these 2 years, because one of the houses where I went to see, when I went to see it, they had a baby and they didn't want people to get in, and they did not enter to perform in people's houses, but they performed outside, and they performed in like huge rain, so they're very, very dedicated. Another change in the repertory was that they did not perform lion dance, because 2 people have to get into the lion costumes, but they performed the drums. So my purpose is to emphasize again the central role the traditional performing arts continue to play in Japan. Not so much in places like Tokyo where they're forgotten, but especially in traditional culture centers like Kyoto, even in times of pandemic. How they could be used as a means of social inclusion, empowerment. COVID had a lot of negative influence, but there's this positive side that make these troops reach out, use technologies, and reach out to more spectators to popularize their art. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Galia Petova, for giving us a very important glimpse of the traditional community performances and how they thrived during the pandemic. And of course, yes, that's a very important note about the importance of community during these times. Well, we will now be proceeding with the next presenter in our general panel 2A. But maybe me remind everyone that we will be having an open forum at the end of both presentations. Also, the sessions, as always, are being recorded. Now, let me introduce our next presenter for General Panel 2A, who is Mr. Emmanuel Jones Vimante. He is a graduate of Master of Arts in Theater Arts at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and an established Cebuano theater director, playwright, and actor. He is also a licensed teacher and the founder of the independent theater group Young Thespians of Cebu, as well as an artist of Dulaan UP. He will be presenting a presentation on the Kadaugan sa Mactan 2019 Performing History and Reenactment. This presentation is a descriptive study of the Kadaugan sa Mactan, Battle of Mactan reenactment of the year 2019. The reenactment serves as a commemoration of the first victory of the Philippines against foreign intruders, depicting Lapu-Lapu, the native warrior king of Mactan Island, who fought against Portuguese Ferdinand Magellan on April 27, 1521. One of the subtopics discussed in this study was how the 2021 reenactment was reconfigured due to the pandemic caused by COVID-19. The study followed the route of close reading and the method of critical ethnography in determining how the Kadaugan sa Mactan reenactment engages a historical narrative performance using the theories of Freddie Rocum on performing history, Vanessa Agnew on the concept of reenactment, and Gay Macaulay on performing space. The study further described how the reenactment is transformed into a historical narrative linked to Lapu-Lapu, a tourism enterprise, and an alternative way to revisit a local heritage or a community narrative based on a collective perception of a glorious past. The study also used the concept of negotiated theatricalization of history to describe activating the performance space as heritage site and using the spectacle to construct a community identity, specifically through performativity of the archive. Everyone, please welcome Mr. Emmanuel Jones Vimante.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me to be your speaker this afternoon. I'd like to say hi to all my professors, Ma'am Jose, and especially to Sir Enrile Tiatco, Dr. Sir Enrile Tiatco. I prepared a video presentation, a recorded presentation, because we recently recovered from Typhoon Odette, so I don't want to get disconnected and interrupted. So thank you very much for the technical team for preparing. So you may play the video now. Hello, the title of my study is Kadaugan sa Mactan 2019, Performing History and Reenactment. This is also my thesis in the graduate studies, major in theater arts at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Kadaugan sa Mactan Reenactment. Kadaugan is a Cebuano Bisaya, which means victory. So a quick historical background about the Kadaugan. This reenactment dramatizes the epic Battle of Mactan, where Lapu-Lapu, the Filipino warrior king who commanded the natives to fight against the invading Spanish conquistadors in Mactan Island. In April 1531, based on Pigafetta's written accounts, Magellan with 60 Spaniards and friendly Filipinos from other islands tried to dock on the shore of Mactan. Lapu-Lapu and his men were already prepared with their iron-tipped spears, poison arrows, and swords. Lapu-Lapu already knew that Magellan wanted to take his village and force him and his people to pay tribute to the King of Spain. In their narrow warships, the Spaniards reached the beach. The battle that ensued was fierce and bloody, and the men from either side, both sides, men fought valiantly. Unfortunately, in the end, Magellan was killed in the battle. So I would like to introduce three major key concepts in this study: performing history, reenactment, and performing space. Echoing from what Freddie Roquem said about performing history is that theater demonstrates the past events through the immersion of liveness in a performance, the relationship of history and theater performing history through its creation process in a community where the past becomes significant in the present. It enables the participants to become witnesses of retelling the past. On the other hand, reenactment is simply repeating the past actions, especially if we're claiming the truth of significant past events. Reenactment is not exclusive to live performances, but this is also applicable to recorded performances such as television and film. And lastly, performance space is related to performance space, the performance space. Like the Mactan Beach is believed where the historical event took place in the Battle of Mactan in April 27, 1521, which later on I'm going to show to you the place or the space of the performance of the reenactment. So performing space is also about reinventing, modeling, and rearranging tangible objects to achieve a particular aesthetic composition. Another way of reactivating the space is through inviting the audience to indulge with the experience. This experience echoes the events of the past, but should not be assumed as the past's complete details of the events. So a quick overview about the historical background before I discuss about the performance. Ferdinand Magellan's quest for circumnavigation, Antonio Pigafetta's account, the conversion of natives in Mactan Island to Christianity, Magellan's defeat against the native Lapu-Lapu, and the 500-year celebration of Christianity in the Philippines in 2021, which is last year. So this map shows the voyage of Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan's circumnavigation of the world and his search for the Spice Island that led him to the Philippines only to meet his demise. Unfortunately, Magellan did not live to complete the first known voyage in history to circumnavigate the world. On March 17, 1521, Magellan reached the Philippines and eventually was defeated and killed in the battle in April of the same year due to his meddling dispute between the two chieftains of Mactan, Lapu-Lapu and Zula. So this is an image or a picture of Ferdinand Magellan. Historical background, the Battle of Mactan. According to Vicente Sitoy, based on Pigafetta's account, described Magellan's death during the battle. He said, Vicente Sitoy, by the way, is a scholar and a historian. He's a Filipino scholar and historian. At length, a Mactan warrior rushed in close and hurled a bamboo spear into Magellan's face. The captain killed the man with a lance thrust, but could not retrieve the weapon from the latter's body. Magellan then reached for his sword, but could draw it out only halfway. For just then, a bamboo spear wounded him in the arm. The Mactan men then rushed at him, a large cutlass. Cutlass is also the Kampilan sword, fell on his left leg, causing him to pitch forward on his face. The warriors then fell upon him, wildly hacking and stabbing till he was slain. Now, this passage is one of the very few sources that generously describe how Magellan was killed in the battle. Unlike the versions by some of our teachers in primary education, which may have over-glorified Lapu-Lapu. Many of us were taught that Lapu-Lapu personally killed Magellan, but according to Pigafetta's account, it was only one of Lapu-Lapu's men who killed Magellan and not Lapu-Lapu himself. There. So this is the Lapu-Lapu Monument in Mactan Island, Cebu. I vividly remember the first time I went to the Mactan Shrine in Cebu, which was one of the itineraries of our educational tour when I was still in grade 1. I saw an image and a towering object that stood formidably. It was the great and famous Filipino hero named Lapu-Lapu at the shrine's center, mightily holding a sword on his right arm and a shield on his left. As we explored the shrine, we also found ourselves a special gallery a few meters away from Lapu-Lapu's statue. In it, a large painting showcasing the Battle of Mactan hanged on the wall. The painting captured the battle on the shores of Mactan between Lapu-Lapu and his men against Magellan's Spanish soldiers. At the center of the painting was Lapu-Lapu piercing his sword against Magellan. The statue and the painting have left a lasting impression in my mind up to this day. And one of the most cogent pieces of knowledge inculcated in us by our teachers when I was back in elementary was that Lapu-Lapu was the first Filipino hero and that he fought against the Spanish aggressors led by Ferdinand Magellan. I recall our history textbook claiming that Magellan discovered the Philippines. I grew up with these historical inaccuracies and redeemed by books and reference that called out these errors and counter the facts by logical questions. How can you discover a particular place when systems of codes and laws were already forged and practiced among people, right? So how can you employ the word discover when native people were already interacting with other foreign traders such as the Chinese and the Borneans? So celebrating the 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines. So mangyaw ang mundo ng ating mga ninuno, a celebratory performance for the 500 days countdown to celebrating the 500 years of the battle in Mactan in April 27, 2021. So this happened before the quincentennial celebration. So it was a 500 days countdown. But sadly, most of the plans that the community had was not realized because of COVID-19. So in my chapter 2, it is a discussion and outlining of documents and competing narratives of the Battle of Mactan, coming mostly from the annotations of Western chroniclers, such as Antonio Pigafetta, and interpreted by local Filipino historians, mostly for academic consumption. Also, I discuss in this chapter the competing narratives of the Battle of Mactan, the relationship of Lapu-Lapu's monument to the reenactment, because Lapu-Lapu also transitioned into a myth, a folk. He became part of the oral tradition, which is very interesting, from historical to folk. And then Lapu-Lapu in various texts and contexts, how he was interpreted in film, in poems, songs, and statues. In chapter 3, the history of the Kaudaugan sa Mactan reenactment. So it's a discussion of the history of the development of the Battle of Mactan reenactment in 1979, which is founded by David Udila, who's now 84 years old, and is considered as the father of Sinulog as well. So it traces back the underlying cause of its conception, movement, and its amalgamation of communities, academics, and stakeholders that were responsible of shaping the performance. Like, these are, I'm going to show you now the images of the first Battle of Mactan, or which was called before as Bahog-Bahog sa Mactan, because Odilao coined it Bahog-Bahog because it was a potpourri of events, not just the reenactment itself. So this is where they did the performance space, the shore where the community believed the actual battle happened back in 1521, like this. So the reenactment happens between 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. because they wait for the low tide. That's why there's like a puddle at the center. And it's done in live instruments. And right after the reenactment, there's also another celebration after high noon, where there's like a street presentation of other folk dances. That, of course, relates to the Battle of Mactan. In chapter 4, the chapter presents and analyzes the historical reenactment. Specifically, it thoroughly discusses the actual Kadaugan sa Mactan reenactment in 2019 during the actual fieldwork of this study. Further, it also analyzes activities and other performances in the context of tourism and the envisioned quincentennial celebration in 2021. So this is the heart of my thesis. So there were celebrities. In the early millennium, celebrities were playing the major characters, such as Lapu-Lapu himself, Magellan, Bulacna, and they were considered as the matinee idols who were walloped upon by the masses or by the people in the community. So in 2019, Magellan was played by Mark Newman, Bulacna was played by Myrtle Sarosa, and Lapu-Lapu was played by Derek Monasterio, where the celebrities playing their reenactment created a buzz that drew many spectators to witness the reenactment. And I think that's how tourism dictates also the performance in the community. Other than that, I'd also like to include that when you go to Mactan, it's surrounded by resorts and establishments. So because business enterprises and other capitalistic establishments attract tourists. So examples of these famous commercial establishments and beach resorts are the Mactan New Town, Plantation Bay, Maribago Blue Waters, and many others. The shrine does not only become a tourist spot, but also a place where people from all walks of life meet and experience both the historical glimpse and the touristic enterprise. Now, part of the week-long celebration is the Rampada sa Calzada, literally means rampage on the road street. Now, this event is a side sweep that contributes to the spectacular promotion of the island of Mactan. The first Rampada Festival was held on April 30, 2011, after the Kadaugan sa Mactan. It is technically patterned from the colorful aesthetic of the Mardi Gras in Brazil. However, this mode of artistic expression has no direct contribution to the Cebuano cultural paradigm and has no historical relevance to the Battle of Mactan. The activity depicts an entertaining event filled with shiny and colorful costumes and astounding dances through which the crowd becomes hyped, disorderly, and ebullient, while simultaneously eating, drinking, walloping, dancing, and many more. At the streets during the Rampada, a long stretch of entertainment stations, which includes food shops, kiosks, and disco stations, is operated. In one of the days during the festivity, a showdown is held, which included colorful and vibrant presentations of choreographed dances. So this is the Rampada, like how the colorful costumes are played out. And to show you the picture of the actual 2019 reenactment, so the Babaylanes in the wedding scene of Lapu-Lapu and Bulacna. The Babaylanes is the priestess. And then the natives in Mactan Island, the village people. And then the arrival of Magellan scene, and then that's Mark Newman playing Magellan. And the death of Magellan scene, 2019. So, kadaugan sa Mactan 2021 during COVID-19, which is one of my subtopics. So, but there, as you can see, they were wearing masks. So, despite the pandemic, a small-scale reenactment was staged on April 27, 2021, which was directed by Rudy Aviles. The performance was a 12-minute long, because usually it's 35 to 40 minutes, but they made it short and was not even open to the general public due to the health protocol and regulations. The actors had to wear face masks during the reenactment. There were proposals to postpone the reenactment to the following year, but on a personal note, it would have been anticlimactic not to coincide the reenactment with the year that 500 years of Christianity celebrated. The pandemic had brought some compromise to the event with the eagerness of stakeholders. Not only was the event successful, but it had inspired the stakeholders to pursue a grander celebration in 2022. So right now, currently, I don't have any news about what's the final, plan for this year's reenactment, but we're hoping that it should be something grander, because this kind of mindset demonstrated the resilience and aspiration of people in the midst of a challenging time. So this is me during my field work. And that's all for my presentation. And I'd also like to extend my gratitude to my advisor, Dr. Sir Anriel Tiatco. I would have not done this study if not without his guidance. So thank you very much, Sir Anriel. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mante, for their very enlightening presentation. Now, I'm going to invite both Dr. Gali Petkova and Mr. Emmanuel Jones Mante to open their cameras, as we will now be proceeding with the questions from our audience. But before we proceed, I'd just like to remind the audience that if they want to ask questions via audio or video, kindly raise your hand signals using the icon in Zoom, or alternatively, I can read out your questions if you send them via chat. All right, so we can now open the floor for questions. The audience, anyone? All right, well, if the audience is still, trying to process things, I'm going to start probably the questions, okay? Both of the presentations sort of deal with the reinvention and the experimentalization or experimentation of young performers with traditional heritage type performances. And I was wondering if there's like a conflict in that, that in this drive to experiment on things, is there something lost within tradition with this type of experimentation, or is it sort of a necessity for these performances to continue? So anyone could answer from our presenters.
Manuel,
Yes, ma'am.
like in Japan, there's very rarely this tension between young and old generation when they get engaged with the tradition. It's usually the young generation follows what's been taught, and it's also like oral and embodiment techniques mostly. So they learn from the more experienced, and then they learn to transmit it to the next generations. I know that Rokusai Nembutsu was really in danger, and a lot of actually elder members in the communities consider it like not worth preserving, and it's usually some male members, like in their 50s or 60s, who draw attention that this is valuable for the community. But in Japan, they very skillfully get the young generation, the male members of the community involved in these performances. For me, what's really interesting when I compare the two genres is while the mask performance, the pantomime, it's very gendered, the representation. It's this focus on Japanese traditional performance to present male and female genders diametrically opposite. Women are always feminine, like performed by men. While the Rokusai Nembutsu, when for the first time I saw it at this symposium, it was a symposium for the citizens of Kyoto. It wasn't an academic symposium. And they complained that there no boys are interested, so they had only girls performing. And because the movements are very different from what you would usually see on the stage, they're not feminine. So for me, this was very empowering, that for the first time I could watch on a traditional kind of stage actually women performing using the male gestures, because they do the with the drums, like, so there's no difference in male and female representation. But older generations, they kind of share that this is not feminine enough, so they come up with pieces that would emphasize the femininity. And they came up with the one dance, I didn't show it, where women, they perform these very feminine movements with pink shawls, and it's quite ridiculous. But this is how actually in a traditional performance which could empower women, they still get these obstacles. And I don't think the girls are aware that what is going on, and like they do both types, the drumming and the dances.
Thank you very much,
For
Doc. Yes, Mr. Mante, go ahead po.
for Kadaugan sa Mactan, I don't feel there was a tension between the seniors and the kabataan or the youth, because ever since the reenactment started, it always started with the youth. They were always activated by the community, by the academies, by the tourism office, and then the seniors were always there to supervise. If as the artistic team, like the directors, the choreographers, the costume designers. And then, of course, we also have the stakeholders, the LGU, the local government unit, the mayor. So it's a collaboration of the community. And besides, it's also a law that was signed by President Marcos that every year there should be a commemoration of the reenactment. Yeah.
Wow. We have a question in our chat, but I'd just like to react about what Dr. Petkova was saying earlier, that the inclusivity and the empowerment being I think a necessary and a welcome step in the development of these performances. But another question for Mr. Emmanuel Mante from our chat affiliation from the UP Diliman. Mr. Jonas Gabriel Garcia is asking, in reenactments, there is often a tendency to either go to the accuracy route or that of fantasy, where participants or performers renegotiate their past, though the former can also do this through intensive immersion. In your study, what route can you say did the reenactment take, and what was being negotiated or renegotiated by participants or performers?
All right. Thank you very much for that beautiful question, Jonas. Yes, other reenactments could really go extreme, like can go like a mythogeographical performance or a fantasy. But for this one, this is historical. And when we talk about history, it also relates to our identity. So accuracy is like one of the main concerns, most especially in staging or delivering the performance. But artists have always been careful about, they've always been anal about presenting it. Like they don't only rely on the text, because the text is the spine. Everything is based on documents, but they also have historians. They also listen to other perspectives. And then, but of course, the performance has also evolved depending on what the LGU would want. Like back in 2019, they would want it to be more, according to them, quoting them, they wanted to be more realistic. So they wanted to veer away from the shiny costumes, the colorful ones. So they really want to depict the rustic, the dark kind of colors, so that it would really project the past, because they wanted to document it and invite the Pope for the 2021. So they wanted somehow a little bit filmic. So yes, because there were also interpretations in the past where it looks like a playground demonstration where they were so colorful. It really depends on who is running the team, like what the mayor wants. So there are a lot of factors that would really alter the interpretation of the performance. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And it's very interesting to note that there's sort of this like crossover. You were mentioning that the plan was to make it cinematic. So from live performances and then transitioning into another medium. So thank you very much, Mr. Mante. Do we have other questions from our audience? You can raise. Yes, Dr. Petkova, go ahead, please.
I have a question to Emmanuel. So who is producing the whole thing?
It's the local government unit.
The local government, yeah. And how do they select performers, different performers each year? So you mentioned that celebrities get involved, but like the massive participants, how is it organized?
Okay, for the celebrities, since they're playing the major characters, it's the sponsors.
Okay.
Who choose the celebrities, not the LGU. But for the ensemble, like the townspeople, the dancers, we tap national high schools. The LGU connects with the physical education teachers, and they require the students to join, and so they're spared from attending the classes in physical education. And then they rehearse, and that's part of their compliance in the subject. Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So there's also sponsors involved, like local companies or at national level?
Mostly local companies, the resorts.
Ah,
Majority
okay,
of
yeah.
them are the resorts surrounding Mactan.
Is it aimed at tourists, domestic tourists, or foreign tourists? What time of the year it's staged? I missed this part.
It's every April 27.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the actual, yeah.
Yes.
So is it most for local
It's
tourists?
both. It's open to domestic and international, but mostly based on my experience during field work, there's still a lot of domestic tourists who come in and watch the performance.
It's not advertised to the foreign tourists to attract them there for this performance, no.
It's advertised in the tourism office. Yes. So
Okay.
one of the strategies that they do is that they include it in the itinerary of the tourists. So okay, if you'll be touring this day, or you can
Okay,
come.
you can, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And last year, was it live streamed? How? Because you said it was shorter.
Uh, Unfortunately, it was not live streamed because our president, Rodrigo Duterte, is supposed to come. So, in fact, during the last year's performance, they avoided using major, like the bigger props, like because they don't want to have any, like, potential assassination that could hurt the president. So,
Okay.
which was very interesting. So the director really had a hard time, from a 40-minute performance, making it a 12-minute performance. So
Yeah.
it was really a challenge for them. And then most especially with the health protocols that they had to
The
observe.
Japanese do something similar, like reenacting famous samurai battles, like on festivals. And the Japanese have similar reenactment of famous samurai battles,
Oh, all right.
festivals. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Wow.
that's very. Thank you. Yeah, it's
That's really
Yes.
fascinating.
Thank you very much. Do we have one last question from the audience? So okay, so if we no longer have any questions, I think we can end our open forum there. Again, we would like to express our sincerest gratitude to Dr. Galia Pitkova, Mr. Emmanuel Jones Mante for sharing their work, their scholarly work, and presentations. I shall now proceed to distribute the certificates for both our presenters for this afternoon. Okay.
Oh,
One
thank
moment.
you. Yeah.
All right, so this is a certificate of appreciation presented to Dr. Galia Petkova
Thank
for presenting the paper titled Performance, Community, Pandemic, Nembutsu Kyogen and Rokusai Nembutsu in Kyoto as panel presenter during the Tradition, Community, Heritage, and the Digital Space panel of the Asian Theater Working Group, International Federation for Theater Research 14th Annual Meeting, and International Conference towards a post-COVID-19 Asian Theaters. Given this March 3rd, 2022 at the University of the Philippines. Thank you very much, Dr. Petkova.
Thank you.
And of course, we also present the same certificate of appreciation to Mr. Emmanuel Jones Mante. Thank you very much to both our presenters for today. And I'd just like to note that these certificates will be sent to you via email afterwards. Also, for everyone, a post-conference website will be available soon.
Okay.
You could visit them every now and then in the DSCTA website at dscta.upd.edu.ph and or the social media pages of the Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts. Just a few reminders before we proceed or before we end our session. Only those who pre-registered in the workshops of Mr. Eric V. de la Cruz and Ms. Maria Stella Rosa M. Lopez are allowed to attend it. So for the Seesaw Creative Sensory Attunement workshop, by Mr. De La Cruz, it has its own Zoom link, while the Tahanan, a collective gathering and experiencing of home narratives through sound, will be done through Zoom breakout rooms. Again, only those who pre-registered should be able to attend or should attend these workshops. Thank you very much. And also later, we will be having a keynote performance of Principe Bahaghari, a adaptation of The Little Prince in Filipino by Teatrong Mulat ng Pilipinas. It was translated or written by Dr. Vlad Gonzalez and directed by Miss Aina Ramolete. So again, thank you very much to everyone for attending our general panel 2A. And of course, here in the our group chat, we have the evaluation form for today. Please take note of this certificate code TCHD space 2A for this specific panel. You must enter this in order for you to qualify for a certificate after the conference. Thank you very much.